folks, I'm Kevin. Welcome back to the shop. Today, instead of doing machine work, we're going to be playing with a little bit of engine stuff. After all, I am a horsepower junkie with a machining problem, so sometimes the other side takes over a little bit. I do have a really large 1972 Chrysler Imperial that had a little 440 in it, and back in those days the power was down just a little bit because of California emissions and things like that, so I decided to do something about it. And that something was to call up a company called 440 Source and order one of their 543 cubic inch stroker motor kits. So I thought I'd bring you along and let you take a look at what you get in that kit, and we'll end up making videos through the build of the engine. So, first of all, there's a cost involved in this, and when you add up the cost of reconditioning factory rods and going through, cleaning up a factory crankshaft, all that kind of good stuff, you're going to have to buy new pistons. It's really not that much different to go ahead and stroke the motor and have a little fun with it. So, what does it cost and what do you get for your money? Well, here's a good idea of what it cost. And you can see that I've got a little bit of extra money built in there for the connecting bolt-on connecting rods. So the kit comes with everything you need for the bottom end except for the grinding that you got to do to make all of this stuff fit and go around in there. They do say that it's a balanced assembly, so they've given me a balance sheet, well, bob weight card. It tells me exactly what everything weighed and how they came up with their numbers to balance all this kind of stuff out, make it to where it's going to run smooth and not try to vibrate and shake itself to pieces. There's a little bit of information that comes with the stroker kit, like how to do what and some things to check out and be careful about. You gotta watch this kind of stuff. Like I said, there's grinding to be done, so we've got to can't just slap it together like factory stuff. Gonna have to get a little bit creative. Not a problem. We can do creative. Then they've given me some information on the pistons, including the clearances to the bore and that kind of stuff they like to see. A little bit of helpful hints that they've got out there. Appreciate that, no problem. And one more sheet, yes, lots of paperwork, one more sheet on the connecting rods. Because this does come with HBM rods and might have got those upgraded ARP bolts for the rods. And of course, it comes with a list of stuff you can't live without. You must have all of these goodies. So, now that your life is complete with the add-on bits, let's take a look at what they actually give you. Now, starting down at the bottom end, we've got the crankshaft bearings, main bearings down here. These are cut for the shorter thrust surfaces that are on the early 440 blocks. They've also got these made for the wider journals on the later blocks. This bearing is sized to fit this crankshaft. This crankshaft has very generous radius on the rod journals and the main journals. So these bearings are made to fit with that radius and not cause any interference, so that's a good thing. Then you get into the connecting rod bearings. That's what we've got here, and again, these are made to clear the chamfers on the radius on the rod journals and to work with the chamfer that's built into the connecting rod. They're cleave-out bearings, pretty good stuff, no complaints there. And just get the last box out of the way, you've got total seal piston rings. There's what we're doing, and you can see the sizes involved in that. It's nice that they sent this along. After all, I bought the pistons from them, so they know what size pistons I've got, what size the bore is going to be, so they've sent me all the goodies to go along with it. It's a bonus. Also, they sent oil ring support rings, because the wrist pin does cut into the oil ring groove on the piston. These are designed to prevent problems with the oil ring getting hung up in that groove and tearing your engine to pieces. So, very happy to see these things. Now, about the pistons themselves. They are Icon pistons. They've got, like I said, a very short height for a big Chrysler. And they've got the floating pins. This is a nice looking piston. This one's kind of all fingerprinted up and whatnot, but the pistons look good. I'm not seeing burrs or any sharp bits on there. There's a couple little marks up here. These are not really cuts in it. They're more like rub marks, so it's not going to cause any heat risers or stress or anything like that. This is going to be just fine. You might not see that on a premium brand piston, but the Icons are not bad. I've used them before. They'll take a lot of abuse, so yeah, why not? It looks good. Now, the thing to know about these is they're going to be a little bit down in the hole when you put your motor together. This piston was not made for a 440, but instead it was adapted to fit the 440. This piston was actually made for the 400 cubic inch motor stroker kit. And you can tell that because the piston's marked as being 33 oversize. And this is actually a 55 oversized bore on the 440. The 400 cubic inch motor has a bigger bore, but a shorter height. And the other components are different sizes. So with this piston, if you bore the 440 out just a little bit to an odd size, it'll fit, it'll work great, but it's going to be a little bit down in the hole, and you're going to lose some of that quench height. They're saying this is going to be about 48 thousandths in the hole. My block has been decked a little bit, so I'm probably going to be closer to 40 thousandths. And with the 27 thousandths head gasket that I've got, I'm looking theoretically about 67 thousandths worth of quench space, which is hardly considered quench, but it's the best I could do with this particular kit without getting into more machining and geometry issues with the cylinder heads and intake and all that kind of nonsense. So this should be fine. This is not an all-out power build. I'm aiming for about 650 in torque, and if I can tickle 600 horsepower, yeah, I'll be happy with it. So no complaints there. Just be aware that if you're looking for a good all-out quench motor, this piston's not going to do it for a 440. Okay, there are other options that are out there. However, this is a nice setup at a pretty good price point. As far as wrist pins go, they look pretty good. I'm not going to argue about them. Compare that to a stock size wrist pin, and well, you can see that this is going to be a lot lighter than this, and it's really not giving up anything in strength. Not going to fuss about that. If you want to compare it to a factory piston, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference going on in here. These things were huge. They were way down in a hole. These were almost 146, 148 thousandths of an inch down below the surface of the block. There was no way this thing was going to make any quench. This thing was just a low compression piston. It is garbage, okay? Absolute garbage. We don't want that crap. So I'll stick with this. Good stuff. Now I did get the spiral locks that go in there. Go into the groove in the piston to hold the wrist pin into place. So this will add a little bit of adventure, and they're known for leaving a trail of bloody fingers behind. So when we get to that, I'll show you what's involved in getting those things in there and not letting them fly off into outer space. Now, connecting rods. This comes with a 7.1 inch connecting rod, H-beam, and that makes for a creative little name that they put on there. It's a good looking rod. It does have the bushed little end with lubrication holes in it. I've looked them over pretty well. It seems to be a good looking rod. There's nothing major wrong with this, nothing glaring. I did get those ARP bolts. I do see some little machine marks down inside the body of it. A couple little tooling marks here and there. But in all, I can't really complain. It looks like a good piece. Now, in all honesty, I must say that I believe the connecting rod and the crankshaft both speak Chinese, but they seem to hold up pretty well. There's no real complaints out there. They say that because of these rod bolts, this setup is good for 1,200 horsepower. For what I'm doing on the street, my power levels, the kind of abuse I'm going to put it through, yeah, I think this is going to be pretty good, and we'll be all right. It did come with the ARP Slick 'em Up, so we can get proper torque specs on the bolts and be in good shape. Now for the anchor in this build, we're looking at a 4.5 inch stroke crankshaft to replace the factory 3 3/4 inch stroke. That's a lot more stroke we're putting on these journals. This crank is a 6-bolt flange on the back, and it is drilled for a pilot bushing, so you can run it with your 4-speeds. It's got some information there, their basic balance idea that they cast with this thing, and then when they go through and kind of drill it out and balance it to meet your assembly. As I said previously, it's got some nice radiuses on the journals, and here on the thrust surface, it looks real nice. I've lifted this protective paper and checked out some of the journals, and they look pretty good. I'm not going to fuss about it. Radiuses are good. There's no tooling marks on the important bits. And even the oiling holes have got a bit of a chamfer to them, so this is looking pretty good. I've got no hesitation about putting some horsepower through this crankshaft. It is I think it's 4140 steel, so it should hold up pretty well. It actually looks to be machined a whole lot better than the factory stuff that came out of it. Now the good parts is this crankshaft is right at 1/2 pound heavier than the forged the cast steel crankshaft that came out of that motor, and it's 1 pound lighter, 1 pound heavier than the factory forged crankshafts that some of the earlier motors had in them. Now that's not too bad when you're adding the extra stroke to it. And the mass to counter that swing, that's pretty good. I like that. This, compared to this, the new rods and pistons are right at, they're about 3/4 pound lighter than this factory stuff. That's, when you multiply that out, it's really saving a little over 7 pounds in the reciprocating mass of the motor, and that's quite a bit. Anyway, there's an idea of what's happening with the build and what we're going to be working on and what you can expect if you want to pick up a 440 source 543 inch stroker kit for your own motors. So until next time, have fun, and we'll catch you there.